Hello everyone. First of all, a very warm welcome to this online learning segment of the CIS. And in today's discussion, as you all know, just now we have concluded with the prelims examination 2021. So today we are going to talk about the prelims paper 1 discussion. And in this series, I'm Ravi Pathak and I'll be taking up the polity questions related discussion, right? So if we see the overall thing, then roughly we can say around 18 to 20 questions were asked in this year prelims, which is as per expected mark, because previous year also we had seen around 17 questions were there as far as this polity constitution segment is concerned. So maintaining the same importance to this year also, some questions, maybe one or two, were of the nature which can be equally clubbed with other subjects also. So like that, you may include them in polity. So if you include them, we will be reaching 20 plus questions. If not, then probably we can say at least 18 questions were there for sure directly from the polity. As far as the pattern is concerned, I hope now you might have got an idea that if we scale up the whole paper from easy to moderate to difficult, then we can keep the paper somewhat at the moderate come low difficulty level. So I can say it was not very difficult, but parallelly it was not very easy also, because some questions were there from the conceptual part, some were from the analytical aspect. So there some twists were there as far as UPSC is concerned, and we know that this Unpredictable Service Commission comes up with these kind of twist. However, some questions were direct also. The important change what we have witnessed this particular year is nothing but that they had asked a question in simple ABCD format also, which generally they don't use to practice, because if you see the previous papers, then you'll find that the questions, then statements 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the quotes, they did use this also, but the subsequent portion of ABCD marking kind of thing was popularly highlighted if you see the things from a wider perspective. So just the simple meaning is that if we have ABCD statement, it is slightly more easy to mark the option or eliminate the incorrect one compared to when we have the statement, because then we have to know all the 4 statements and then the quotes accordingly we can mark. Otherwise, when it is ABCD, at least will be very comfortable in elimination part, which I hope you all might have taken the benefit of it. So when we talk about polity, the questions were from different segments, no doubt about it, right from the very basic concepts like the meaning of state, nation, and so on, including some questions from fundamental rights related with the liberty or right to property, what we say. So that kind of questions also we have got. Some questions from the various aspects, legislature, executive, judiciary. So there also we had seen a couple of questions about the lawmaking and all stuffs were there. Plus, last but not the least, some questions. Always they ask 1 or 2 questions, which might be either very out of context, or the student might not have dealt with, such questions, maybe purely from political science or maybe public administration or maybe law background kind of thing. So those were hard to attempt, though they were based upon the facts only. But the thing is, generally we don't cover those aspects in regular classroom program also, and otherwise also students don't read them because they might be old information, old enough not to be taken care. So in that case, always we have to risk ourselves with 1 or 2 questions. But if I'll include all, let's say around 20 questions, so I'm sure you might have been able to perform well with the 80 to 90% accuracy, going to 16 to 18 questions correctly. Now here what we'll do, we'll discuss the answer key related with that particular topic and some of the interlinkages also, how these questions were actually framed, what was the idea behind them, were they based upon the recent developments or based upon the NCERTs or based upon the conceptual and the analytical understanding, or a wider reading. Any student who had done the wider reading means reading between the lines, then those students might have really performed well in polity segment. But those who might have ignored these things, for them it might be a little bit troublesome, right? Perfect. So let's move our discussion with the segment on polity, and when we talk about the questions, let's take them one by one. So here if you see the question, first question, I mean, we are not numbering them because obviously they are in a jumbling order when we talk about the various sets, A, set B, set C and set D. So whatever set you have got, accordingly you have to look into the question. So when we talk about the first question, it says under the Indian Constitution, the concentration of wealth. So the moment, I mean, if you underline this concentration of wealth, right? So they are asking violates which of the following? So 4 options are given. That means it's a mostly fact-based question or easy to attempt if you have the sound understanding of this. So when we talk about concentration of wealth, again, it is nothing but some sort of, we can say, socialistic principle, right? Or a part which is related with the directive principles of state policy. So here we can say it is a question which has been directly picked up from DPSP or directive principles of state policy. And there, if we see the Article 39, various clauses of it, A, B, C, D, up to E, and including the F also. So multiple clauses are there in which one of the aspects is nothing but to prevent the concentration of wealth, right? Because this is against the socialistic norms. So that's why when we talk about under the Constitution, concentration of wealth violate which particular thing? So obviously not the right to equality, neither the right to freedom, nor the concept of welfare, but it is nothing but the principles of state policy, or we can say directive principles of state policy. So here, very easy question based upon the facts. If you've done thoroughly the part 4 of the Constitution, that is DPSP part, then there would not be any issue as far as this particular question is concerned, right? Perfect. Then moving further with the next one, here they are asking what is the position of right to property in India. So when we talk about the position of right to property, we all know initially we started with ensuring the right to property as a fundamental right. So obviously we all are familiar with first part, that is nothing but it was a part of fundamental rights, FRs what we say, and 2 places it was mentioned. One was under Article 19, clause 1, clause G, and other was Article 31, right? So initially we can say it was a part of fundamental right, but they're not asking about what was the position initially. They are asking what is the position right now. So we all know that this right to property, because of the controversial aspects related with it, whether it's land reforms, whether it's about 9th schedule, we have seen a couple of amendments in the regular class, including the 4th amendment, 7th amendment, 17th amendment, then 25th amendment, then 42nd amendment and 44th amendment. And by concluding all those things, or if you have studied the class notes properly, attended the class properly, or you might have done your own study, then also you'll be able to conclude this, that the present position had been changed and from fundamental right, it has been moved to Article 300A, right? So the present position is, it is in the Article 300A. Now what 300A is about, it's making the right to property, no doubt about it, not a fundamental right, but still we can say it is a constitutional right, or we can say it is a legal right, right? So still the property rights are intact with us, but the difference is when it was a part of fundamental right, it was difficult for a state to acquire your property, to take your land for the developmental purpose, and a lot of litigation issues were faced. But now being a legal right, the state had the power to acquire your land with or without the requisite compensation. So that is what the idea, that is present it is moved into Article 300A. Now let's see the question. They are saying what is the position of right to property? So first thing is clear, it is no more a fundamental right. So let's see the option. Fundamental rights available to the citizens is no more a part of fundamental right, so no chance. Then neither fundamental right nor legal right. No, this is also incorrect. Why? Because now we know that initially it was fundamental right to begin with, but now when we say it is what? It is a right to property with the legal status. So we can say it is available legally. So it's a legal right. That means this statement also goes wrong. Then legal right available to citizen only, and legal right available to any person. So once we came to the conclusion that it is a legal right, then the confusion is whether it is for the citizens only or whether it is for the person. So If you read the Article 300A very carefully, then the word which is used in Article 300 is available to the person, right? And when we talk about available to the person, what does it mean? Person includes both. It could be a citizen also, and it could be a non-citizen also, or a foreigner also. So that means what? That means the correct option would be the present status of a right to property is not the fundamental right anymore. It's a legal right, or even if the statement would have been given a constitutional right, then also we would have said yes. Second thing, it is available to any person present in the territory of India. So with this corollary, we can say the correct answer would be B. That means, what is the position of the right to property? So it's a legal right now, and after that it is available to any person. Is that clear? Perfect. Then moving further with the next question. So first two questions seems to be easy, direct. Third one also, again the elimination game, because no quotes A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4 is given. Directly we have to mark. Let's see. Simple question. What is the exact constitutional status of India? So when we say exact constitutional status of India, then this question can be related to preamble also, because by reading the preamble only we'll get the exact idea of what kind of nature of the state called India is prescribed. However, what they are saying, on 26 January, not today, on 26 January 1950. So whenever we get the questions like what, who, when, where, why, with these keywords, we say it's mostly based upon the factual premises or fact-based question. So here, was it a democratic republic? Was it a sovereign democratic republic, or was it a sovereign secular democratic republic, or was it a sovereign socialist democratic republic? So generally when we deal with the preamble, we always request you to remember the keywords in the form of triple SDR, right? So when we use this word triple SDR, then it stands for the sovereign socialist secular, triple S, and DR, that is democratic republic. And this is true, but if we see in today's context, but when we started, we all know that the words like the socialist and the secular plus integrity, I hope you remember these three words, or what we use the keyword as SSI, had been added later by bringing an amendment into the constitution. Initially it was not there in the preamble, and for that also we had a lot of debate, and based upon that corollary only we got to know that preamble is a part of constitution. It can be amended. So all these things we have discussed in detail. But anyways, those students who are not maybe the classroom program student, or for the general student who are watching this particular class right now, for them also, if they read it, then so far now we know that only one amendment has been done in the preamble, and that preamble is something which gives the final status, or we can say the exact constitutional status of India on 26 Jan 1950 and today as well. So after the amendment, this is true, no doubt about it. But before that, these three words were not there: socialist, secular, and integrity. So what is remaining there? Sovereign was there, yes. Democratic was there, yes. Republic was there. That means only SDR was there, and by that corollary we can say for this also the answer would be P. All right, if you are noting it down, you can note it down, or if you just hearing it or understanding, then there is no problem. Is that clear? So again, the fact-based question and easy to attempt. So I'll put all these first three questions on a easy scale: direct question, factual question, and if you have a good reading habit, you might not have found any difficulty in eliminating all this wrong option and marking the correct one. Then let's move on now. Now here the question is, what is constitutional government means? Again, this is nothing but something related with the first part only. That when we start the discussion on Indian polity, there we talk about the various form of government, the parliamentary form of government, the representative form of government, or we can say democratic form of government, constitutional government, etc., etc. Right? When we do the basic concept like state, nation, government, territory, population, and so on. So there we see the state and other form of state also: police state, laissez-faire state, welfare state, and so on. But here question is not about the state, it is talking about the government. So government could be of any type. could be democratic government, it could be laissez-faire, it could be autocratic, it could be monarchical, it could be dictatorship, it could be military coup. So many manifestations of there, but they are asking about the constitutional government. So simple. Even if you have not read this, then constitutional government by corollary also will go a government which is established by, or we can say the details of which is mentioned in the constitution. So here they are saying constitutional government means a representative government of a nation with federal structure, right? So this could be a character of a government, no doubt about it. Government can be representative, government can be federal or maybe sometimes unitary in nature, no doubt about it. However, whether it's a part of constitutional government or not, that is what the question is. So looking at the other option, a government whose head enjoys nominal power, maybe, may not be. There are many government which are constitutional government, and there the provision for real executive or real power also may be there, like presidential form of government. So that is also not there. A government whose head enjoys real power, again, maybe, may not be. So a certain element of diciness is there. But when we speak truly in the sense constitutional government, that means what? A government which is limited by the terms of constitution. So by elimination also, if you go out of all the statement, only this statement use the word constitution. A simple idea, simple logic to mark the correct answer. And otherwise also, constitutional government implies that it is a limited government. Why? Because in constitution, there would be certain provisions, dealing with what? Dealing with the government, that is the institutions and organizations which are there in the government, they will be dealt properly. The people who are going to hold those positions or these institutions and organizations, like if we take example of PMO, Prime Minister Office. So Prime Minister Office is an institution, and the person who occupy, for him or her we call Prime Minister, that is a person. But how these two would be arranged, that would be mentioned in the rule book, law book, or law of the land, and that is nothing but the constitution. So hence constitution puts certain restrictions, certain limitation, maybe vis-a-vis what? So very simple. This also we have discussed, that there is a term called constitutionalism, you might have heard, where there has to be a judicious balance between the rights of the people on one side and the powers or the authority given to the government on other side, and they has to be in proportion. That means neither the government should enjoy the arbitrary power or absolute power or unlimited power, because then it would be what? A sort of police state. We don't want that. If we give the unlimited rights to the people, then nobody will listen to them, the government, the authority, and it will become a chaotic state. So this should not happen. That's why the constitution actually emphasizes upon a judicious balance between the government and the people, right? That means what? It puts some sort of restrictions or reasonable restrictions on government so that the rights of the people may not get violated. That's why a constitutional government is something which is what? Limited by the terms and conditions of the constitution. That means the correct option here is nothing but D. So we can say, what is constitutional government? Constitutional government is that type of government which is having some sort of imposition of reasonable restriction on it as far as its power or the authority is concerned. So I hope this argument is also clear, right? Yes or no? Then next question, let's move on to. When we talk about the next question, consider the following statements in respect of Bharat Ratna, right, and Padma Awards. So when we talk about Bharat Ratna and Padma Awards, I hope you have read about them, at least you might have heard about them. And when we talk about these two awards, considered to be one of the prestigious awards given for a particular contribution into the society, right? So here when we talk about their contribution, right, the person's contribution, for that they are awarded, fine. But how it is related with polity? Let's try to see the arguments. Now this question, they have given the statement, plus they have given the quotes also. So we have to be careful. Why we have to be careful? Because now we need to know all the statements. Then only we'll be able to mark. Like for example, first one, the Bharat Ratna and the Padma Awards are titles under the Article 18. This bracket 1 means clause 1. So under Article 18 Clause 1, they are what? They are nothing but they are the titles under the Constitution of India. So if you remember Article 18, right? If you have read about it, then Article 18 talks about what? Article 18 talks about abolition of titles. They must not be there. And why? Because it may violate the principle of equality. So that's why it is covered under the provision of right to equality, which is from 14 to 18. So here when we talk about how they are going to be what? Obstructing the equality. So there it has been said very clearly that as far as the Bharat Ratna or Padma awards, these are concerned, they are not considered as titles. So actually they are titles. They are saying they are the titles. Answer is they are not considered as titles. This exception has been given in the various ruling of the court. Plus it has certain exceptions like academic title, military title. These are the exceptions to Article 18. Why? Because they do not amount to title. I hope you know the meaning of title also. Title is something which can be used as a suffix or prefix against one's name. So these awards are given for the contribution that is called theory of equality, and it should not undermine the theory of merit. If somebody has done the contribution, they must be recognized. However, when it becomes violative if it is used as a title. That is, if somebody is using Bharat Ratna or Padma awards or Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan as what? A prefix or suffix with one's name, then it will become violent. So the whole idea is whether this talks about, 18 clause 1 talks about this as a title. No, they don't. That means the statement is incorrect. It's not correct. So as I said, whenever the codes will come, the things become a little bit difficult. So you have to be very careful. Then Padma awards, which were instituted in 1954, true, they were instituted in 1954, no doubt about it, were suspended only once. Now this becomes wrong when we say suspended only once. In fact, in late 70s, right, and in late 90s, they were suspended. From 93 to 97, they were suspended. So this is more than once, not once, right? That's why this statement also goes incorrect. Now, the third one, the number of Bharat Ratna awardee or awards is restricted to a maximum of 5 in a particular year. So here they are giving a numeric that in any year 5 or less than 5 people can be awarded Bharat Ratna. So this is not. Why? Because in the act itself it can be given maximum to 3 people. That is, this third statement is also incorrect. So point here is all the 3 statements are incorrect. Now let's see what they are asking. Which of the above statement are not correct? That is incorrect. And you can see all the 3 statements are incorrect. So if you see the answer, clearly you can mark answer D. Right? That is the Bharat Ratna and Padma awards. First of all, they are not titles, and statement saying they are titles. So wrong. Second, not only once, more than once it has been suspended. And third, out of the 5 people or 5 awards in a year, no, it is actually the 3 awards what we say in a year. Is that clear? Perfect. Now let's move on to the next one. Now this is also a good question. It can be related with the current development also, and it can be the part of core area also in judiciary. So let's see what is the statement here with reference to India, right? Consider the following statement. So first, again, it is in a coded form. So first statement, let's try to check. Judicial custody means what? So first of all, what we mean by custody? Custody is something what? Sort of detention. It could be a short term, it could be a long term detention. So first of all, the word custody, right? Custody simply implies what? Restricting someone's movement. So when we talk about custody, it could be of many types. It could be a judicial custody, it could be a police custody, it could be a armed forces custody, right? It could be a house arrest also. So all these forms are nothing but part of custody. And as far as the detention part is concerned, we had seen in Article 22 and Article 20 about conviction and arrest. So all these areas you also might have done in your reading or in studies or in classroom programs like that. So we are clear with what is custody. Custody is nothing but restricting someone's freedom of movement. Okay. Anyways, here they are saying judicial custody means an accused is in the custody of the concerned magistrate. So judicial, magistrate, obviously. Up to here the statement is correct. And such accused is locked up in police station, not in jail. Now this is which makes the statement incorrect. Why? Because when we talk about the police custody, right? So there, if somebody is, let's say, arrested as per Article 20, the person will be put in lockup, the police custody, lockup part, not the jail. And the obligation is to present that particular person within 24 hours to the nearest magistrate. If the magistrate allows to go for further detention, or there would be, preventive detention laws where advisory board would be constituted and they will look into the extension of detention. But that part we are not discussing. Here the idea is nothing but judicial custody. So when we talk about this particular custody or putting someone in lockup, that could be for 24 hours. After that, the magistrate may extend. The magistrate may initiate the things or proceedings for the trials. Trials are started and then the police will request the remand, right? For what? For investigation and all those things. Now that remand may be granted or may not be granted, and if not granted, then they will be put in judicial custody. So there would be judicial custody means what? Now they are going to be in jail, but under the observation of the magistrate or the court concerned, right? That is what the essence behind the judicial custody. So here when we say not in jail, this is what the word which makes it incorrect. In fact, in judicial custody, they are going to be in jail. In police custody, they might be in lockup for some time. So that makes this statement wrong. Now I told you this can be related with the core aspect also, or this could be related to the current. You might be knowing about some custodial death which were in news a couple of months before. Last year also we had seen the death of father-son duo in one of the southern state in the custody. In many custodial death, it is one of the grave concern, not only for the citizen, for the people, but even the bodies like Human Rights Commission and all those things. Anyways, so that's how you can relate it with the current affairs. So first statement goes wrong. They are actually put in jail under the judicial custody. Second, during the judicial custody, the police officer in charge of the case is not allowed to interrogate, probing the question. Since they want to interrogate, that's why they want to keep them in police custody. No, they can torture the prisoner or the accused or the convicted, and they can get the confession. That is what the idea. But when somebody is in judicial custody, the police officer in charge, whomsoever it may be, because still we have a confusion on separation of law and order and the investigation part. That's why in our country we see that police not only arrest the people, they start investigating also. Okay. So here during the judicial custody, if the police officer or the investigating officer who is in charge of that particular case want to interrogate the suspect or the accused, then they will not be allowed to do it without the approval of the court. So two ways of eliminating this. One, you can see the word not. Other, you can see the word without. Negative and negative both. That becomes positive. That is what? By default, the statement will become correct if you apply this logic. Elimination games, what we call for PT. So during the judicial custody, the police officer in charge of the case is allowed to interrogate with the approval of the court. That becomes correct statement. Or otherwise, not allowed to interrogate without. That means again the same thing. They can interrogate, but only with the permission of the court or the magistrate, whomsoever is the right authority. So that means what? The second statement of this particular argument sounds to be correct. No doubt about it. That means by this logic, let's see the quotes. One only? No. Two only? Yes. So the correct answer would be B. And recently also you had seen, no? We have lots of cases related with the drug and narcotics and all those things. Every time the police, the NCB, other agencies, they are demanding, they are asking for the concerned custody. But no, the accused, or recently we have Aryan Khan case and all those things are going on in media. So there also he is put in judicial custody. So like that, you can see that it is more or less related to the current affair. Not Aryan Khan, because prior to that only the paper might have been prepared. Okay, so this is the answer, or correct answer for this particular question is nothing but B for Bombay. Then let's move on to the next question. Now here it is said that again it is related with the prisoners, jail and the reforms. So here it is said that with reference to India, consider the following statement. Now, when we talk about this particular statement, when a prisoner makes out a sufficient case, listen carefully. When a prisoner makes out a sufficient case, what does it mean? Sufficient case here means not the documentary kind of evidence. Sufficient case is somewhat related with their behavior in the custody or in the jail, their code of conduct, how they have behaved, some reasons for which on humanitarian grounds some relief can be given, maybe to attend the ceremony back home, sister's marriage, maybe to attend the funeral of some person who might have died in the family. So like this is called if the suspect or if the prisoner makes out a sufficient case. You might have heard about a topic we generally deal with, rights related with the under trials. There are also a lot of reform, introduction of section 436A, right? So that even those people can be granted parole, because this is what the term which is you need to understand. So when we talk about the parole part, now parole must be given or they must be left out on bail, but bail and parole is different. In bail you have to give some security, you have to, or you may have to deposit some money, or somebody should give the assurance for you. So bail is a different process. Parole is where without money, based upon your conduct and based upon the some of the circumstances which might have developed, for which you need to go out for some time from the jail, that is called parole. So here, when a prisoner makes out a sufficient case for himself or herself, then also the parole cannot be denied to such prisoner, because it becomes a matter of his or her right. Now here the statement contravenes. First part, when a prisoner makes out a sufficient case, that means what? That means he is showing that he or she is eligible to get the parole. And there, what they are saying, this parole cannot be denied to such prisoner because it becomes a matter of his or her right. Now, this is the controversial word they have used, the matter of right, right? But here you have to remember one thing, that parole is not a matter of right. It is based upon the conduct or other circumstances. That is, even if the prisoner will have sufficient case, sufficient supporting arguments or the documents to be released on parole, still the prisoner cannot go to the court or the authority and demand it, because it's not a claim or it's not an entitlement for the prisoner, right? So since it is not a claim, it is not an entitlement, the prisoner cannot demand it as a matter of right. However, what it is, generally the parole will be given not as a matter of right, but as a matter of what? Discretionary power of the authority, right? So by discretionary power of the authority may grant the parole, but the prisoner or the convicted person will not have the right to demand it. They cannot say it's my claim or entitlement, I need to have it because I have a sufficient reasons for the same. No, this is not the case. Is that clear? So first statement goes wrong. Now let's see the second statement. Second statement says that the state government have their own prisoners release on parole rules. Okay, no problem. Why? Because when we talk about the subject, it belongs to what? The state list. And when we talk about the state list, then definitely they have the power to make the law on that legislation as per Schedule 7 of the Constitution. right? They can make the rules related with that. Prison reforms or law and order itself is a subject which is related with the state. So there they have this power. That means this statement seems to be correct. So state government have their own prisoners release on payroll rules, and then for a same case, same sufficient document, one state may release their prisoner on the payroll, the other state may deny. Anyways, so which of the following statement is correct? So they're asking about correct statement. First one, no. Second one, yes. That means answer is, that is only 2 we can say is correct. Is that clear? Perfect. So let's move on now to the next bit. Now this question is based upon the pure fact. No analysis, no understanding required. If you remember the fact, it's fine. If you don't remember the fact, then it would be difficult to attempt. So here they are saying at the national level, which ministry is the nodal agency to ensure effective implementation of a particular policy, that is what, of the scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers. A recognition of the forest right, that they also have certain rights on the forest produce or the products, right? So it was old legislation notified in 2006, right? But their question is very simple and factual, because they're asking at national level which ministry is the nodal agency. This much what we have to remember. So generally the confusion may arise because looking at the recognition of forest or traditional forest dweller, a person may get confused and may mark the correct answer as A, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. But trust me, it's not. Why? Because Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has nothing to deal with the recognition of the forest rights or the forest dwellers, maybe the traditional tribes. So this answer is wrong. Panchayati Raj, no. Though there is extension of Panchayati Raj institution or so-called Extension Act or PACE Act, which talks about what? Panchayati Raj extension in scheduled areas, right? That is related with administration, not related with the rights or recognition of the rights over the forest produce or the products for the forest dwellers. So this is also wrong. Rural development has nothing to do with that. Ministry of Tribal Affairs, this is the ministry, or we can say it's a factual question. I said no, whenever you get A, B, C, D, it's a factual question. And in polity, always remember one thing, apply simple logic. If you complicate the things, it will become more complicated. Some of you might have marked this Ministry of Environment and Forest unnecessary. So keep it simple. That will help you a lot to eliminate the option. So straightforward, we can say the answer for this question, that is at national level, which is the ministry? Very simple to understand. This is nothing but Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Is that clear? Perfect. So let's move on now to the next one. Now again, a beautiful question, slightly complicated for those students. I said some students are there who are always, prefer themselves to read wider, extensive, reading between the lines. Some students may be there who might be reading just the lines, right? Narrower approach to reading. And this question is simple. Why? Because again, ABCD, so fact-based question. No quotes and nothing like that. But let's see what is the question. So here they are saying a legislation means any law, right, which confers on the executive, right, or the administrative, both are executive only, executive and administrative, both are administrative only. Executive may have political non-permanent and permanent non-political executive like bureaucrats and the politicians. Administrative, bureaucrats. Authority, right, so which confers on the executive or administrative authority an unguided, listen this term, uncontrolled discretionary power. So any law which is going to give what? Authority or power to the executive or the administrator for which is unguided, uncontrolled or discretionary, or in simple word, I would say a law which is giving the absolute power, right? Absolute power to whom? Absolute power to the authorities, maybe the bureaucrats or maybe the administrator, right? Here we can say executive. So any law, if it is doing so, okay, what next? in the matter of application of law. So when they are going to implement that law, that means application of law. So while implementing, that is implementation of the law, formulation will come from the supreme authority, that is legislature. They are authorized, or so-called parliament. Legislature means law-making power is with what? Parliament. But we know that parliament doesn't make the whole law. They use the concept of delegated legislation and they make the framework, blueprint, or we can say the draft kind of thing, skeleton form, and the rest details would be filled by them. And while doing so, that is while exercising the delegated, because this is delegated legislation related thing, if the legislature or parliament has given the absolute power to them, not only to fill in those details, plus also to implement, because at the end of the day, it is the executive who will implement. What will happen? Which one of the following rights or the articles of the Constitution of India will what? Violate. So, as I've told you, if you read the question properly, you'll understand the answer. But still there may be confusion. Like in this, when we talk about Article 14, basically related with rule of law, right? Equality before law, equal protection of law. So Article 14 deals with this. Article 28, if you remember the article, then you will find that it has no correlation, because Article 28 of the Constitution talks about imparting the instructions, or especially the religious instruction, in the institutions. So what kind of institutions are there where the religious instructions can be provided? So religious instructions where? In the institutions or organization like government institution, aided, unaided, private institutions, and so on. So that is related to the right to freedom of religion. Article 32, it talks about the rights, or we can say constitutional remedy, right, for protecting or guaranteeing the fundamental rights or acting as a grievance redressal mechanism for those victims whose fundamental rights had been violated. They can go to the court and the court can issue the writ for them, that is Supreme Court, and fivefold writ jurisdiction. Article 44, it talks about the UCC, Uniform Civil Code, DPSP. So when we talk about DPSP, there is no question only. Why? Because it is a non-justiciable part of the right. It is not justiciable. So even if it is violated, we don't have a right to go to the court. So their question is what? Which one of the following gets violated? Now here, why I'm taking this in detail, because some students might have got confused, and even let's say I am also a student and appearing for the exam, so there I might have got confused between Article 32 and Article 40. Otherwise, these two are clearly eliminated. There is no correlation related with the religious instructions, and there is no correlation with the UCC, violation of UCC. And even if it is, it's a part of non-justiciable. So conflict between 14 and 32. Now, some of you may have marked Article 32, but unfortunately, that is the wrong answer. Because Article 32, if you see the essence of Article 32, I said it comes into effect when the rights get violated, not for violating the rights, right? So, first thing. Second thing, if you see the statement very clearly, is there anywhere written that if fundamental rights get violated because of this particular arbitrary law or absolute power? Kahin bhi nahi likha hai. So it could be what? Violation of my legal right also. It could be a violation of my political right also. It could be violation of my social, cultural, any right. But Article 32 will protect only for violation of fundamental right, not for any right. But this absolute power, while implementing the law, can violate any of my rights, not only the fundamental rights. So that's why it goes against what? The principle of rule of law. So first of all, the Constitution will take utmost care not to authorize the executive or the administrator to make such law. But because of some loopholes, let's say executive got the chance to make these kind of law, then in judicial scrutiny, they will be declared unconstitutional, invalid, ultra vires, null and void. And that can be done by applying either of the doctrines, equality before law or equal protection of law. So, since this law guarantees the rule of law or equality before law or equal protection of law, you know those concepts. That's why if this kind of legislation is authorized to be implemented by the executive or administrative authority, then it is a clear-cut violation of rule of law. and that is mentioned in Article 14. So that's how we can say the correct answer would be Article 14 rather than Article 32. And that's why you need to understand the difference between the. Am I clear with this? So here the correct answer would be what? The rule of law. Is that clear? That is Article 40. Perfect. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. When we talk about the next question, then which one of the following in Indian polity is essential features? So keywords are Indian polity, essential features that indicates it is a federal in character. So basically the question is related with federation. Again, the basic concept. In basic concept only, we actually learn that what kind of country we have. Do we have a union nature of polity? Do we have a federal nature of polity? Do we have a confederal nature or confederation kind of arrangement, or do we follow the quasi-federal polity like that? So any teacher might have taught you about all these differences. What is the difference lies? And whenever you have studied this topic or even by your own, then you might have understood what are the essential characteristics of feature. Generally, we write 5 essential characteristics. Division of power must be there, supremacy of constitution must be there, rigidity in the constitution must be there, written constitution must be there, supreme authority or a court must be there. All these are what? The basic character of federation. Now, let's see what the question is asking. So, they are saying which one of the following is the essential feature, and that to Indian polity. Please remember, if they would have used the word which one of the following is essential feature of federation, then might be all the answers might have got correct. But anyways, and this is also factual because no quotes are given. So in Indian context, when we see what kind of federal polity we have, let's try to see. So a polity where the independence of the judiciary is safeguarded, and you got the answer. Why? Because one of the essential characteristics out of this 5 is nothing but talking about the independence of judiciary, right? And for this, judiciary is always in conflict with the executive and legislature, because legislature put the limitations on judiciary, judiciary declares that null and void, so that tug of war is always going on. And for independence, so many historical cases, including the Keshwanand Bharti case, you know, right? So the point here is for a federal balance, because the true meaning of federation is what? Division of power between the center and the state. And when we talk about this particular power, already we have 7 schedule. The list is given, but still some sort of overlapping comes up and it leads to a dispute. So let it be the dispute between center and the state, or between 2 or more than 2 states. The Supreme Court, right, apex court, has the authority to resolve that dispute, give the verdict on that dispute, give the judgment on that dispute. So point here is center and state, when we talk about, are the essential character of the federation. Then if any dispute comes, independent judiciary will only be able to resolve that dispute. Otherwise, the federal structure may get collapsed, right? So that's why when we talk about this, this is the essential feature. We got the answer. In exam, we don't need to read the other 3 also. But even, I mean, we know that as a student, we have to, because UPSC always keeps the possibility of having more than one answer correct. So एक बार बाकी भी देख लेते हैं कि अगर 2 आंसर करेक्ट है, then what? Then you have to choose the appropriate one. So let's see if there is other argument. The union legislature has elected representative from the constituent unit. True. To a certain extent, true. Because in the central parliament, the members come from what? The states only. In Rajya Sabha. In Lok Sabha, we have a directly elected representative, but certainly it is one of the feature. However, not everywhere. The union cabinet can have the elected representative from the regional parties. Again, may be true. If regional parties have got the elected MPs, then they may be a part of union cabinet, which is a part of council of ministers. There is nothing wrong in that, right? However, is it an essential characteristic? No. It is possible in non-federal government also, or the unitary government also, or confederal government also, or quasi-federal government also. Then the fundamental rights are enforceable by the court of law. True, for any democratic country. But a country which is federal but not the democratic, how come this clause would be applicable? So that's why ambiguous. So all the three is what? Very specific to some country, some democracy, some sort of political setup. But when we talk about uniformity, let it be any federal country, there one of the key feature out of the five would be what? Independence of judiciary. And that's why this answer goes correct. That is one of the beautiful feature of Indian polity, or essential feature of Indian polity, is nothing but to have independence of judiciary along with supremacy of constitution, division of power, rigidity of the constitution, written constitution. These are some essential features. One of them is independence of judiciary. So we can say this is the essential feature as far as the federal nature is concerned. Clear? Perfect. So moving further on the next question. Now this question is generally from the first class. Those students who might be taking our classes, they might be knowing that whenever we start the polity session, we start with the basic concepts, right? And in basic concepts, what we take? The nation, state, government, population, territory, and so on, right? So those very basic things, the first day of the polity starts with this only. And there we have got the question. So when we talk about which one of the following best, again, they themselves have given the subjectivity that all may be correct, but the best defines the term state, right? Now, if you have done the classes, you might be knowing that for state, what we have said, the state is something which have four essential characteristics. So state, it's a part of political unit which have government, which have territory, which have people, that is population, and which is sovereign in nature. So let's try to look out for these four words. By this also you can go just by a simple definition of the state, if you know that these are the four essential characteristics. Otherwise, obviously we have discussed what is nation also. We have differentiated it from nation and the state. Then what is a nation state and what is a state nation? That part also we have seen. What is the meaning of one nation, two state, two nation, one state, a nation without state, etc. But only this much will give you the idea to eliminate the option. And since it is ABCD, that means no confusion, straightforward question. So let's see the option here. A community of persons, that means we are finding something, people or person. So community of persons. Permanently occupying a definite territory. So other word is also matching. Independent of external control. This is what we call sovereignty. Sovereignty have both the aspects, internal and external. So this is a part of external control. So if we are free of it, that means sovereign, and possessing a organized government. That means sovereignty is also there, government is also there. In one strike, you can mark the option A as a correct. No need to read the other three in ABCD kind of thing if you get the answer at the first go, right? Yes or no? Anyways, just for satisfaction purpose, we can read the other statement. B, a politically organized people. So you may say, yahan bhi to person aa gaya. Here also we have a person, agreed, theek hai. Of a definite territory, so territory bhi aa gaya. And possessing an authority to govern them, matlab government bhi aa gayi. Maintain the law and order, protect their natural rights, safeguard their means of sustenance and so on. This is the part which actually making the statement incorrect, right? Why? Because it is not necessary or mandatory condition for them to become a state. If it is there, it is a hypothetical phenomenon, or we can say it is a conceptualization of ideal state. ऐसा होना चाहिए. लेकिन जहां नहीं होता है, wherever it is not being taken up, then can't that be classified as a state or what? It will be. So that's why the second argument goes wrong. Now, a number of persons, so here also we have persons who have been living in a definite territory. So territory is also matching for a very long time with their own culture, tradition and the government. Now, here the government is also there, but no mention of the term sovereignty. Second thing, when we have the cultural affiliation or a group of people having a common culture, language, or homogeneity is there, that actually classified as attribute of a nation. So they can be a good answer for nation, not for the state. Then a society permanently living in a definite territory. So there they are talking not the people but the society. Territory is there with a central authority. No, it could be a federal authority also. An executive responsible to the central authority and independent judiciary. Fine. But it may not qualify to be the state. Why? Sovereignty is missing, right? So like that, if you know the basic definition of the term state, that's why I said we start the basic classes with this only. And by these 4 terms, you can very clearly say that correct answer is A. You can save your time by not reading this, but in exam, we can't do that. That anxiety makes us to read all the 4, then only we'll be reaching to the conclusion. But after reading the 4 option, then we'll be very clearly coming to the first option. That is nothing but it is a what? It is A, which is the correct answer. Is that clear? Perfect. Now, let's move on to next question with reference to Indian judiciary. So, we got some questions from judiciary also. Consider the following statement. So, consider the following statement. That means what? We'll get the quotes. And when we get the quotes, things become a little bit difficult. But good thing is only 2 statements. So, slightly easy we can say. We can play the game of elimination here. See, trust my dear friend. Saying this in the classroom is very easy. Saying this after the exam and discussing the paper is easy. But we know the pain that when we as a student sit in the examination, then it is very difficult. इधर तो सब ज्ञान अच्छा लगता है, उधर जाके प्रॉब्लम हो जाता है, उधर इतना दिमाग नहीं चलता. Anyways, so with reference to Indian judiciary, let's see the following statement first. Any retired judge, okay, fine, of the Supreme Court, all right, of India can be called back to sit and act as Supreme Court judge. Yes, true. Because in judiciary we had seen that there is a concept of what? Ad hoc judges. Right? There is a concept of acting judges. And there is a concept of appointing the retired judges. So all the 3 are there. That means up to here the statement is correct. But the question is by whom? Who did this or who does this? So here they are saying by the Chief Justice of India, okay, with the prior permission of the President of India. True. This is what is mentioned. It is done actually by the President of India, right? So like that, all the acts are done by President of India only in theory. But in practice, it is the Prime Minister. We know that who heads the Council of Ministers. Similarly, here also, it is going to be with the consent of the President of India, but actually it's the CJI which will execute the task. So, when we say it is by the Chief Justice of India, the statement holds true. Only condition is not on the discretionary power of Chief Justice of India, but the CJI has to take prior permission of the President of India. And if the President of India had given the permission, then there is no problem as far as this statement is concerned. So correct. Second, High Court in India has the power to review its own judgment. Now, when we talk about the power to review its own judgment, what does it mean? It simply means we are talking about judicial review. Yes? And 80% of you will say yes. No, we are not talking about judicial review. Because if we talk about judicial review, this power is there under Article 32 with the Supreme Court. Article 13 with the Supreme Court. 32 in case of fundamental rights and 226 in case of other rights and fundamental with the High Court. No, this approach would be wrong. So what is the correct one? When we talk about High Court have the power to review its own judgment or not, like the Supreme Court, that means here we are talking about the jurisdiction of the courts. So while doing so, you might have done this part, Supreme Court and High Court. Supreme Court has 5-fold jurisdiction: original jurisdiction, advisory, appellate, revisory and writ. So with the power of revisory jurisdiction, they have the power to review their own judgment. So in case of Supreme Court, no problem. Question is whether High Court can do it or not. So as far as High Court is concerned, High Courts were not authorized to review their decision. Or in simple word, we can say they do not have the revisory jurisdiction with them like the Supreme Court. What they have? They can act as a court of record like the Supreme Court. And this was the main basis for the litigation, that actually the High Court have the power or not. Now, initially, let's say suppose this question might have came previous year or back to back, we could have marked this as what? Incorrect. But recently the Kerala High Court judgment gives us a very clear picture. So you can say which is related with the current also. That Kerala High Court has stated that the High Court also have the power to review its own judgment because what? Because the power to review its own judgments emanates from court of record. And High Court is also what? High Court is a court of record. So with that regard, we can say this question answer would be yes, C. Is that clear? That means both the statements are correct. Yes. But earlier if it has been asked, then it might have been considered to be a wrong statement. Next, when we talk about India, so with reference to India, consider the following statement. Okay, citizens, okay. So it's in the form of what? Codes. 3 statements are given. Let's try to inspect 3 statements and then we'll find the correct code. So here it is said that there is only one citizenship and one domicile. Whether it is correct or not? Perfect. Why? Because in India, we know that there is nothing called dual citizenship. So ये आपने पढ़ा भी होगा. Though we have the concepts like PIO, persons of Indian origin, OCIs, overseas citizens of India. Now we have merged them also with the OCC card holder. But still, we follow single citizen. They are not the full citizens of India. Right? NRI, they are the citizens only. So all these arguments you know, that means there is only one single citizenship in India. That's true, no doubt about it. Right? Because the moment person will acquire the citizenship of other country, either by willingness or by default or by some forgery and all those things, his or her Indian citizenship stands cancelled. So no doubt. Second part, one domicile. Now here the student might have got confused. Why they might have got confused? Because they might have thought that I have a domicile of state of Uttar Pradesh plus I have a domicile of the state of Maharashtra, state of Punjab. Now if you have, then you are doing something wrong, illegal activity, because ultimately in India you are allowed to have only one domicile of any one of the states, right? That means here the idea is not one domicile for the country, but one domicile for the state. Parallelly, I cannot have the domicile of 2 states or more than 2 states or 1 state, 1 UT like that. So this statement, there is only one citizenship, correct, and there is only one domicile, there cannot be dual. वैसे तो लोगों के पास 10-12 आधार कार्ड भी होते हैं, but that is illegal, no? Officially we are allowed to have only one UID, unique identity number, right? फर्जीवाड़ा करके आप 2-4 बना लो, अलग बात है. लोगों के पास 10-10 पासपोर्ट होते हैं, but that is not the rule. Rule is you are allowed to carry one passport. So point here is what? There is only one citizenship and one domicile. The statement is correct. Okay. Second, a citizen by birth only can become the head of the state. Head of the state in India is president. Head of the government is prime minister. So this question is about president, or we can say citizenship only. So a citizen by birth only. Now to get the citizenship, we know that there are multiple ways, 5 ways: birth, descent, registration, naturalization, or by incorporation of the territory as per Article 11 or as per the Citizenship Act 1955. However, when we see the eligibility criteria of the president, that who can be the president of India. So Article 52 says there shall be, means must, president of India. 53-54 talks about election. And there we talk about the criteria. So in eligibility criteria, any person above the age of 35 years plus who is an Indian citizen. So it just written Indian citizen. Nowhere in the eligibility criteria of the person who is willing to contest the election for the post of President of India, it is said that the citizen must be by birth. Citizen could be by what? Registration also, by naturalization also. Only condition the person should be citizen. So this statement stands wrong because of this word, only can. So a citizen by birth only can, that means this is not correct. Okay. Next, a foreigner once granted the citizenship cannot be deprived of it. Again, elimination game. Cannot be. ऐसा कैसा possible है? Foreigner को छोड़ दो, Indian citizen ने अगर कुछ ऐसा किया है which is against the rule for which termination clause exists, like by forgery or 420 or something like that, then Indian citizenship can also be what? Deprived of, terminated. So what about the foreigners? Definitely it would be right if they have traded some communication or information with the enemy country, if they have shown the disloyalty, if they have shown the disrespect towards our constitution. Many conditions are there we had seen, right? So in those cases, the citizenship of a foreigner will definitely stands cancelled or will be terminated or will be deprived. So this statement also goes wrong under any circumstances. No. In some circumstances, it is possible to deprive of a foreigner from the Indian citizenship. That's why this particular statement also goes wrong. 2 and 3. So first one is correct. That means the answer for this particular question is what? A. That is 1 only. So this question, I can put it what? In the bracket of simple plus some bit of conceptual part is also there, which we need to understand. Take. Perfect. So let's move on to the next one. Now, when we talk about the next one, it talks about again a factual question. ABCD मिल गया. जैसे ABCD मिल गया, ठीक है. बल्ले बल्ले हो गई क्योंकि this is what? Going to be the easiest mode of eliminating the things, because when the quotes comes, it becomes a little bit difficult. Okay. So what is the question saying? Which one of the following factors constitutes, now again, the best safeguard of liberty? That means all of them can be a safeguard for liberty. UPSC ने खुद ही hint दे दिया है, right? But here they are asking about which can be constituted as the best safeguard. ऐसे जब words आते हैं तो थोड़ा सा seriously issue को देखा करो. So which of them can be what? Best safeguard? A committed bureaucracy? Could be, maybe. Provided what? The government should be welfare oriented, right? That means committed judiciary is what? Committed judiciary is something which is committed for not the people but the government which is in power. And what if the government turns to be autocratic? Right? That means what? This bureaucracy, if it is committed, then it will support the government, even if the policies are against the right of or the welfare of the people. That means, in fact, it is against, or it may be, against the liberty of the people. Right? So here, the best safeguards of liberty, when we talk about, then this may not be possible. Why? It may be if the government is welfare oriented, but it may not be. What if the government turns to be autocratic? So we don't want a committed bureaucracy. Rather, a neutral bureaucracy would be much more preferred system of administration rather than committed. A active bureaucracy could be accepted, but not the committed one. Centralization of powers. Oh, if we have centralization of power, it is exactly against the what? Essence and the spirit of the liberal thoughts. Because more and more decentralization, more and more delegation of the power would definitely empower the citizen not only at the mid and the higher level, but even at the grassroots level. So centralization of power, again, that means the statement is also wrong. Elected government. Maybe, may not be. Communist government में भी countries में election होता है. ऐसा नहीं कि नहीं होता है. Elected government could not be an essential or at least the best safeguard. It could be some extent, ठीक है, we can say liberalized democracy must have, or what they have said, in a liberal democracy, the government must be elected by the people. True. But not only in democratic countries we have the elected government, we can have the elected government because for election also there are various aspects. separation of power. So this argument also goes wrong. That means the correct option is D. Why separation of power? Because separation of power is that theory. Remember, we have discussed the Montesquieu, right? The spirit of law, John Locke, father of liberal democracy, or liberal word, the liberty word. So point here is, when the separation of power would be there, right, then separation of power means separation of power between the three wings, legislature, executive and judiciary. And if this separation of power is exercised, though Montesquieu referred to be a very strict, rigid separation of power, which might not be possible in democracies like India. But if we really want to have the best safeguard for the liberty, this is what, because if one wing will try to encroach upon the people's right or power, the other two will try to control this, and vice versa. So then we can say the essentials of the liberty, especially in a liberal democracy, can be best safeguarded if we have the separation of power. And if we have a weak separation of power like India, then we can couple it with the mechanism of checks and balances, C and B. So both the aspects. If we have a rigid separation of power, by default it will ensure the liberty part. If weak, then it can be supplemented by the checks and balances, what we follow in India. But this question is not related with India per se, it's in general. So we can say this argument is correct. Or we can say the correct answer for this particular thing is nothing but the, is that clear? Okay. So next question, let's move on. Now here, again the question is based upon the parliamentary democracy only, right? Or we can say the democracy which we follow, or parliamentary system what we follow, is a part of British legacy. So related with that. So here they are saying we have adopted the parliamentary democracy based upon the British model, or which is also known as Westminster model. ठीक है, कोई गलत बात नहीं है. But difference क्या है? How does our model differs from there? तो वेस्टमिंस्टर मॉडल और हमारे मॉडल में क्या डिफरेंस है? कई सारा डिफरेंस है जो हम रेगुलर क्लास में देखते हैं. भाई वहां पे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्की है, हमारे यहाँ पे इलेक्टेड हेड ऑफ द स्टेट है, भले इनडायरेक्टली इलेक्टेड है बट है. सो like that, let's see what are the options they have given. First, as regards with the legislation, so simple, legislation means lawmaking, talking about the parliament. So as regards with the legislation, lawmaking is authorized for legislature, or in simple word what we call parliament. So as regard with legislation, the British parliament is supreme. Okay. British parliament is supreme or sovereign, but in India the power of the parliament to legislate is limited. Perfectly all right. Nothing wrong in the state. As regard to legislation, lawmaking, British parliament is supreme. Why? Again, remember the basic concept, basic topics. Do you know when we were doing, or anybody, any teacher might have taught you like that only, that when we talk about the typologies of the constitution, then constitution is of two types, written and unwritten. And while differentiating those two, the countries which have the written constitution, for that, what we use the term? Supremacy of the constitution. So when we talk about India, here, what we follow? We follow the supremacy of the constitution, right? But when we write for unwritten constitution, that is UK or, the British model, Westminster model, there, what we write? Parliament is supreme. You know that famous say, no? What? British parliament can do anything except making a man a woman and a woman a man. Right? So except this, they can do anything. Itna power hai British parliament ke paas. Right? That means the first statement is what? Is correct? Yes or no? Okay. इंडिया में ऐसा नहीं है. क्यों? क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ सुप्रीमेसी ऑफ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. और if we want to, or even the legislature is making some law, and if it is against what? The constitutional provision, then that law may be declared what? Null and void, ultra vires, or unconstitutional by the judiciary. So this provision is there. That means what? Parliament is allowed to make those laws which are as per the provisions of the constitution. So the constitution is supreme, or it acts as a supreme law. But in their country, parliament is supreme. Now, second statement. in India, the matters related to the constitutionality of the amendment of an act, okay, of the parliament, are referred to the constitution bench by Supreme Court. Okay. At the first impression, this answer is correct. Why? Because whenever the parliament makes the law, and if the law, whatever the law or the act or the amendment done by the parliament, who will decide it is going to be unconstitutional or not? Judiciary. And for that, judiciary constitute the constitutional bench. We had studied that. Minimum number should be 5. Maximum number could be anything. So far now we have highest number of judges bench constituted in a constitutional hearing or constitutional bench is 13. Keshavanand Bharati case. However, यहाँ पे problem क्या है? Why the student might have got confused? Because of this word, are. Yes. That means what? In India, the matters related to the constitutionality of the amendment of an act of the parliament are referred to the constitutional bench or constitution bench by the Supreme Court. Here, the better word could be can. Because if you are saying are, that means you are saying only. But in UPSC language, don't worry. In are, the respect of saying this is nothing but can only. That Supreme Court can refer that to constitutional bench. Otherwise, other authority also can do so. Maybe the executive can do so. Parliament itself can do so. Right? So, the thing is, here, this statement becomes slightly dicey if you have focused more on this word. But if you have ignored it, it's a good sign that in India, matters related to the constitutionality of amendment, who will decide? Court will decide. How they will decide? By establishing a constitutional bench. So, they will refer that case to the constitutional bench, and then whatever the verdict of the constitutional bench is coming, that would be upheld. Is that clear? So, in that sense, both the statements, what? Seems to be correct. 1 and 2. So, answer 1 only, 2 only, no. C. That is, both 1 and 2, both are correct. Is that clear? Perfect. Then, let's move on to the next one. Now, this is some question. Even if we would have attempted as a student, we might not been predicted this kind of question, or we might have done it wrong, or at best we could have left it. Always I say, out of 100 questions, 20 questions are such questions from different topics which we must not attempt. Maximum attempt, even in case you become emotional, don't go beyond 80, because then the risk start. This is one of them. No correlation, not directly from the current or something like that. Old question based upon, or this question might be attempted by those students who are what? From political science background, who are from public administration background, who are from law background. They could have attempted it correctly. But for a GS student, and honestly speaking in the class also, we don't take these topics. Some reference we can give about N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, or maybe Administrative Reform Commission 1 and 2, or maybe, C.D. Deshmukh study team, or Santanam committee, etc., etc. But that is governance, some topic. In polity, we don't take it. But they had asked. And now we don't have any choice. Plus, they have asked in a coded manner. So again, we don't have any choice. So if you know this, then only attempt it. Or you might have attempted it. If not, then you could have skipped it. That would be a better option. But let's try to see what they say. With reference to the union government, consider the following statement. तो अब तो इसमें तुक्का लगाना पड़ेगा 50-50 या ऐसा कुछ, अगर अटेम्प्ट करना ही था तो. So N. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, most of you might not have heard also because of non-pol science bad background student. Committee suggested that a minister and a secretary, okay, to be designated solely for pursuing the subject of administrative reform. पहली बात तो administrative reform जैसा कोई subject है ही नहीं, ठीक है? When we look into the administration in detail, we'll find it, right? But otherwise, let's say administrative reform. For that, Administrative Reform Commission had been established twice. Once in 1966, other is in 2007 or 2005, and they have submitted the report in 2008, and the earlier one 1966, and they have submitted in 1969. Anyways, what they are trying to say, Gopalaswamy Iyengar committee had suggested that a minister and a secretary must be designated solely for this particular purpose and promoting it. True, it was done by Mr. Gopalaswamy Iyengar Committee. So this statement holds correct. कोई लॉजिक नहीं, बस फैक्ट है जो याद रखना है, राइट. सेकेंड, इसमें थोड़ा आप ट्राई कर सकते हैं. In 1970s, that is 66 to 69, I told you ARC1 was constituted. So in 70, the DOPT, Department of Personnel and Training, the full name is Department of Personnel and Training, was constituted on the recommendations of Administrative Reform Commission 1. That is 1966. This is ARC1. ARC2 was in 2005 to 2008. Virappa Moili Saab was the chair. Anyways, when we talk about this, then, and this was placed under the PM's charge. True. But थोड़ा सा इसमें गड़बड़ी है. गड़बड़ी ये है कि वो फिर उन्हीं लोगों को पता चलेगा, those who are from that particular optional background or those who might have done the detailed study, कि जब हम बात करते हैं DOPT को, तो now तो we have MOPT also, Ministry of Personnel and Training, then we have DOPT, Department of Personnel Training. तो ये डिपार्टमेंट तो एक ऐसा है with whom you are going to get connected forever once you are selected. All stuffs related with your recruitment, training, promotion, pay, salary, allowances, grievances, everything would be considered by this department. But before selection, some students might not be knowing about it. That's also true. So some students might not be aware about it, but those who are aware about it, they might be knowing that this particular department is always, the PM also have some portfolio. So generally PM always, few exceptions may be there, but PM always keep this department with, as far as the DOPT is concerned, Department of Personnel and Training. However, in 66, when the ARC recommended, reports came in 69, government accepted that, and the government did not keep that directly under the Prime Minister. Actually, it was kept under another organization that is known as Cabinet Secretariat. So it was placed under Cabinet Secretariat. And by default, the Cabinet Secretariat is also a portfolio which PM actually helps. So by that link, we can say the statement is correct, right? So both the statement 1 and statement 2 is correct. So by that code, if we go, the answer is C. But sorry students, from our side also and from UPSC side also, because this was not expected, right? And this kind of teaching generally is not imparted to the students in polity class. In optional classes, this might be the case that, the person or the faculty might had definitely discussed about it, no doubt about it, but not a very general phenomenon. If you have attempted C, it's fine. If not, if you have left, it all the more good. But if you have attempted wrong, then don't worry, it's not your mistake. These are some of the gimmicks what UPSC always plays. Now, let's move on to the next question. So, again, a factual question, ABCD, smart, easy, or the easiest question I would say, right to privacy. So much of hue and cry is protected under which article? So, right to privacy, we know that a historic judgment came on right to privacy in Justice or retired Justice, I would say, right? K.S. Puttaswamy case. And here, the petitioner's argument, as I've told you, was nothing but whether the right to privacy is a part of right to life with dignity or not. So when we talk about right to life, definitely right to life is what? And the personal liberty is part of Article 21, and it does include the dignity. So right to life with dignity, because this was decided way back in Menka Gandhi case. That in Menka Gandhi case, 1978, the court has given the verdict that right to life includes the right to life with dignity. It doesn't mean that mere animal survival or existence, right? So within the ambit of that dignity term, right to privacy had also been included, and this was finalized in Puttaswamy case. So all these are nothing but the part of 21. So it's a simple one, because 15, no discrimination, 19, freedom, 29, cultural and educational rights. So none of them have a direct correlation with the privacy, but the Article 21 is the one. So correct answer for this question is C. Simple. Then next, consider the following statement. Again, this is related with some, important topics only, but not very much in current. Yeah, sometimes it keeps popping up. That is Representation of People's Act. So it says India there is no law restricting the candidates from what? From contesting the elections, right? Listen, there is no law restricting the candidates from what? From contesting the election in one Lok Sabha election from 3 constituencies. Now, this is the problem. First of all, when they say there is no law, वो तो possible ही नहीं. India is a country which is called jungle of law. For every tidbit we have a law. So there is a law. तो उसी से ये statement गलत हो जाएगा पहले तो. और there is a law. Which law? As I told you, there is a law that is called RPA. So we have 2 RPAs. One is 50, other is 51. Representation of People's Act 1950 and 1951. This especially, Representation of People's Act 1951 under section 33 to 37, we can find a very clear-cut mention. And in 33 clause 7, this has been said or written that maximum permissible is what? 2 constituency. वैसे नहीं समझ में आएगा. अभी जो लास्ट लोकसभा इलेक्शन हुआ तो भी आप देखेंगे वहां पे फेमस पर्सन्स लाइक मिस्टर मोदी और प्राइम मिनिस्टर हैड कंटेस्टेड फ्रॉम 2 लोकसभा कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसीज. मिस्टर राहुल गांधी, opposition leader, he contested from 2. So you know that person cannot contest more than 2. 3 वाला तो वैसे भी मतलब तुक्के से भी आप लगाएंगे तो सही हो जाएगा. That means the statement is not correct. Now, in 1991 Lok Sabha elections, Shri Devi Lal contested from 3 Lok Sabha constituencies. अब ये कहां से पता चलेगा और कौन पढ़ाएगा? देवीलाल का तो अभी कुछ न्यूज में भी नहीं था, है ना. 1-2 साल में कि कोई रिवाइज करे कि देवीलाल ने क्या किया था. लेकिन अगर आरपीए ठीक से किया है तो आरपीए का तो 33rd सेक्शन है, उसमें जो 7th क्लॉज है दैट हैज बीन एडेड इन 1996. तो ये आइडिया लग सकता है कि 96 के पहले ऐसा कुछ लॉ नहीं रहा हो. बाय दैट यू कैन डू दिस, राइट. और जब उससे पहले ऐसा कोई लॉ नहीं था, रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव इफेक्ट उसका नहीं था, तो डेफिनेटली हो सकता है देवीलाल जी ने कंटेस्ट किया. और एनीवेज दिस इंफॉर्मेशन इज करेक्ट, राइट. सो इट इज ट्रू. दैट मीन्स स्टेटमेंट 2 इज व्हाट? करेक्ट. Now, third, as per the existing rules, if a candidate contest in one Lok Sabha election from many constituencies, many means more than one, and his or her party should bear the cost of by-elections to the constituencies vacated by him or her, winning in all the constituencies. Okay? Now, this third one can be related with the current. So, as per the existing rule, बस यही गड़बड़ है, otherwise नहीं, because this is not as per the existing rule, rather this is as per the recommendation or suggestion or as a suggestion, which is what? A part of electoral reforms, right? So, under electoral reforms, it has been said or suggested or recommended that what? If a person contest the election from 2 constituencies, and what if he or she wins from both? One, they have to vacate, because this is the rule. A member can be what we have in India, the single member constituency formula. So a person cannot be a member from 2 constituencies. But in case if he or she wins from both, then obviously they have to leave the one, and there we need to conduct the by-election because somebody else needs to be elected. So there it has been a recommendation in electoral reform that the cost of that particular by-election must be by the political party whose candidate has got elected from that constituency. दोनों में से जिसका कैंडिडेट जीता है दोनों कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी पे, वो बाय इलेक्शन का कॉस्ट उनको उठाना चाहिए, लेकिन अभी ये इंप्लीमेंट नहीं हुआ है. दैट मीन्स इट इज स्टिल अ रिकमेंडेशन, राइट. सो इट इज नॉट ट्रू. वही मैंने बताया. और एकदम रिसेंट में देखे तो अभी वेस्ट बंगाल में जो इलेक्शन हुए, भवानीपुर सीट को खाली कराया गया, फिर से ममता जी को उस पर कंटेस्ट करने के लिए कहा गया. तो ये सब चीजों को देखते हुए इट इज वन ऑफ द रिफॉर्म्स व्हिच हैड बीन एडवोकेटेड. सो first and third is not correct, and the question is which one of the following is correct? One only? No. Okay, so answer is B. That is only statement 2 is correct in this regard, not the other two, that is 1 and 3. Right? Yes or no? Perfect. So that's all we can have as far as the questions from the polity is concerned. Now, if you have any doubts related with the answers what we have discussed. See, we had tried our best to give you the authentic answers, but we will use the word most authentic because almost 95 to 98% we can rely upon this. At the end, it is the UPSC which will give you the final answer sheet or final answer key. That too, it will come after the remaining 2 stages of the examination will get over. So don't wait for that. Second thing, if you see the overall paper, again, though it's our personal opinion that cutoffs may range again from 92 to 95 is what you can expect, or on a very higher side, if you are anything 100 plus, rest assured that you are done, right? In case suppose you are on a boundary line or lesser than that, then also I would request you personally on behalf of my whole team of Drishti IAS that please start preparing your mains. Take a break for a day or 2 or maybe 3-4 days just to regenerate yourself. You had just underwent a lot of pressure for preparing for the prelims. COVID was another issue. Many other stuffs were there. You had came all those issues and you have appeared for your prelims. Now it's not the time to relax because very shortly we are going to have the mains. And for mains, whether you are by matching the answer key on cutoff, well above the cutoff, well below the cutoff, doesn't matter. Just try to imagine that this situation will come every year. Suppose unfortunately you are not making this year, then also next year the same pressure would be there. So try to read for or study for your mains exam with the same pressure. What if you would have qualified PT? Then that kind of pressure should be there. And let's say suppose you are calculating your answer keys from the different sources and you said that no, I'm not going to make it. You drop the idea. And all of a sudden the result came, you qualified. What will do for mains? And for those students who are sure that they will qualify, why they are in a dilemma? Why they are waiting? See, I'm sorry to say this, but more than 60% student, they wait till the PT result before they can start their preparation for the mains. Don't do this. What you can do at the best? I mean, again, it's my personal opinion, quote unquote, that till the time your result is not coming, try to complete the conventional areas. This you can do. Both the optional paper, they are not going to change. That you do. The GS paper 1, paper 2, paper 3 and paper 4, wherever you find the core area, static area, try to cover them. That is the one thing that you don't need to, only leave one thing, that is the current affair part, to be done later. Plus, I would request you to start writing the essays also. Almost 2 or 3 essays per week because essay is also 250 marks. So, essay, core area and optional paper can be done, and make sure you finish it, at least your core area of GS and the optional, before the result of prelims. Then when the result comes, you are in, you will get enough time to revise these things, plus you will be able to add upon the current affair. But you just keep swinging on, saying that I'm a border case, I may get, I may not get, in a dilemma and waiting for the result. And if the result comes, you are on a positive side, then you'll regret of losing this time, right? So that's all from my end for the day. I hope you have enjoyed the things. For more information, for more details, and for your preparation related queries, you can always get in touch with us on various platforms of Drishti IAS, including our website drishtiis.com, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel for all the current updates and the related topic videos. Okay? Plus, you can walk in also for getting any information. Our experts will be more than happy to assist you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. All the best for your mains exam. Thank you.